Non-duality and religion. Look, non-duality basically means oneness. It means oneness. And every single religion is inclining in one way or another towards this oneness. Over years, there might be many diverse sects, many different groups that may arise within this religion, and then different variations of these practices that arise from these groups and sects. But in essence, even in the midst of all of the variations, the different innovations, the different changes that take place in ancient religions, as well as the Abrahamic faiths, which are quote unquote monotheistic, there is always the underlying pointing towards oneness or non-dual truth. And this you find through and through. However, when you go to Hyde Park Speaker's Corner, or you're just browsing online, you always find people debating why their religion is better than the other religion, and I know the truth and you don't, and there's all these conversations that have been going round and round for thousands of years. Now, non-duality and religion, I want to kind of bring them together and really look at it in a way where we can recognize that it's all in the same. Right now, if you go on YouTube, or if you might be going to these retreats, or there's all these books and all these spiritual gurus and masters and teachers who are preaching non-duality or Advaita Vedanta or some form of variation of that. If this carries on, or I'd like to say that maybe in some years to come, this eventually develops into its own religion, right? It develops into its own sort of movement. When really the underlying purpose is that it's the pathless path. It's an investigation through which all investigations cease, right? But of course, what tends to happen is that these teachings may be accumulated, certain spiritual gurus' words or books may start to be taken literally, and then it kind of forms into some sort of system whereby if a particular method doesn't fall in alignment with a certain, let's say, institute or a certain governing body of this non-dual movement now, then it's deemed incorrect and it shouldn't be followed, and so on, right? It will then eventually turn into a system, and really it just falls into the same category as other religions, right? Because other religions are also systems. But fundamentally, it's all oneness. It's all oneness. It's all a thrive towards some sort of unity, some sort of unification. Non-duality is or the process, or the, let's say, the teachings of non-duality, or the pointings are pointing towards oneness, the absolute unity that prevails regardless of how separated and fragmented we allow reality to look or to appear because of our beliefs and our ideologies. But in essence, it's unity. The same as every religion. Every religion is there to point towards unification. And I can comfortably say that if a particular religion is not providing teachings or rulings that are towards unity in some way or another, then either these teachings are innovated, they are false, they have come about later on down the line because some sort of powerful figure in that religion has tried to accumulate some sort of power, or try to manipulate their way into getting what they want. So if the teaching isn't, leaning towards unity or the results of the teaching or the rulings aren't there to bear the fruits of unity in some sense, then it's either an incorrect teaching or it's been misinterpreted or something like that. And it's very simple why I can say this. It's because, at least looking at the Abrahamic faiths, monotheistic faiths, and even other religions that aren't quote-unquote monotheistic, the inclination is always towards some form of unity, because in unity, that's where fruits are found. It's the path of unity that bears the fruits. And this you see in all aspects of life. Only through separation can there be suffering and conflict. But through unity, all beauty is born. And it's very, very simple. For a tree to bear fruit, there is some sort of unification process. So I use bearing fruits as an example. Trees and plants and vegetation are an example. There's some sort of unification process through the movement of pollen or whatever the process is, or the combination of the sun and the earth, and we've been in these science classes before. But then when you look at man and woman, through that unification, something beautiful can be born out of that unification. There is a thrive, there is a continuation through this unification. And you can look at so many different examples, and I can sit down and list them, but I want this to hopefully appear within your observation, in your everyday observation. It's not very difficult to realize that through separation, there is at the very least a higher level of tendency for conflict to arise, for suffering to arise. But through unification, conflict dissolves and suffering dissolves. And so for this reason, when you look at religious teachings or even non-dual teachings, the very purpose behind them is unification, in the form of allowing the practitioner or the religious person or the investigator or the person who's doing self-inquiry to recognize that there is absolute unification in some indirect or direct way. So for an example, religion might teach you to help the needy. And so you have to put a certain amount of money aside every month or every year so that you may provide for those who are less fortunate. This extension of your help is teaching you, or is showing you, that a part of you can be dissolved so that you may be extending this help out to someone else. So that it's not just about you accumulating just for you, because you accumulating just for you strengthens the notion of the you, the identity. And so if there is just a you, an identity, then there is also everything else. And in that there is separation. There is you versus the world, you versus everything else. And so you can quickly see how this is separative. If separative a word? And then the same with non-duality. You are investigating, asking questions into the nature of what appears. When you ask yourself, who am I? Whatever appears is to be recognized that isn't you. It's something that's been accumulated somewhere down the line. And so a true spiritual practice is not there so that God can be pleased or happy or feel in any humanistic way, right? Or it's not that God is waiting for you to do something wrong so that you can be punished and shot into hell, right? These narratives are there to allow many different individuals to understand what's going on in a easy, streamlined way. But when these narratives aren't understood, then what happens is that they are taken literally. They view God, the divine, or this higher truth as a personified truth, something that is flowing or taking place in accordance to how we see reality in our paradigm or within the realm of this very you. That is, to begin with, giving you a fragmented perception of life, a separative perception of life. So it's always about unity. It's always been. And so if it's not about physical unity, or perhaps geographic unity, or maybe whatever emotional unity, whatever different type of unity, there are different dimensions on which we can thrive for unity. Here, we are at least talking about the type of unity in a realm or dimension that is very often overlooked, and that is perhaps the psychological unity. Hopefully, through actions and striving towards physical unity, eventually that is translated into psychological unity. And so what does psychological unity look like? It's the recognition that you are not the center of the universe. That yes, you have opinions. There are opinions and thoughts, but they are not everything. These opinions and thoughts, the more there is an identification with the image of who we think we are, the you that I've been speaking about, that brings about this separateness, the more there is this identification, the stronger the opinion and an idea that appears, the more of a pull it has, the more of a warp and influence it has on the perception or perspective of life. But that's why there is these practices, perhaps physical practices, and entering into meditation, prayer, pleading to something that is higher than you, so that this you recognizes that it's not the biggest or greatest thing there is. It's something that is manufactured, and that manufactured accumulation of ideas then expresses itself, and that's also a beautiful process. But when it's isolated and taken as the center of the universe, then whatever opinion arises becomes the center of the universe. It's the most important opinion. No other opinion matters. And it's that very same opinion that is causing you to suffer. Because when you isolate your opinion to everything else that takes place, not just other people's opinions, just everything else in nature and reality, then there is that separateness. There is that suffering that comes about from this. And so unification isn't you trying to bring one opinion, combine it with another. No, it's to recognize that whatever opinion arises is just something that arises within reality as anything else arises. As the clouds move through the sky, or the trees and the leaves, they dance to the wind. As the birds move, as sound is heard, as there is colors, pictures, all of these things are arising and subsiding, and then arising and then fading away, arising and fading away for eternity. And so, are we able to just observe the beautiful waves of reality appearing and disappearing? That's all it's about. And truly, once we observe, we are able to observe this, recognizing that whatever we believe of ourselves, however we feel, are all things that are falling within the realm of experience. They appear and disappear. It has a start and an end. and it goes on for eternity. This is perhaps the psychological / spiritual unity that I'm talking about. So non-duality and religion, which one is right or wrong? If we are going to enter this discussion, we're just going to exchange opinions. And what do we just say about opinions? Right? Opinions have their time and place. They're very useful, they have their utility, but not when it comes to the absolute unity of reality. Thank you so much for watching. This is Hassan from The Spiritual Walks, and we are all on a journey towards the truth.